So India, the world's most populous nation, the fastest growing major economy, and on paper, a future superpower. But here's one thing. In 2025, India's GDP per capita is only 2,500 USD. That's roughly where China was more than 2 decades ago. And China today is 5 times more than that. So what's holding India back? It's not population, it's not talents, it's not ambition, it's structural issues. We have identified 3 factors that drags India down. Let's dive in. So first, India doesn't save enough. India wants China's growth, but it does not save like a builder. It spends like a rich consumer. Every major economy takeoff, like Japan, South Korea, and China, all started with one solid foundation. You have to have domestic capital to fund infrastructure, factories, and jobs. China knew this. That's why in 2007, when China was posting 14% of the growth, its national savings rate was 45% of GDP. That's how China financed roads, railways, and industries without relying on foreign capitals. But India is stuck under 30% of the saving rate, and that gap matters a lot. Less saving means less capital. Less capital means more dependence on foreign capitals, on foreign investors, even on Chinese money to build Indian power plants and Indian roads. And it's not just about numbers, it's also institutional. India's financial system is fractured. Its private banking industry dominates the ecosystem, but they avoid the rural India, where most of the population actually lives. The China state-owned banks, in contrast, have always had one overarching objective. That is to mobilize savings across the country, all the way from Shanghai to Tibet. Even worse than that is a political problem in India. Its election cycle discourages savings because every 5 years, the political parties and their factions would just like outcompete each other with populist handouts, loan waivers, cash transfers to their voters. In the short term, that buys the votes, but in the long term, it also kills the physical discipline for people and weakens the saving culture for India. Prime Minister Modi now, in his third term, has the political power to change all this. He could rebuild the rural saving banks, he could reform the political campaigns, and he could lay the financial foundation for long-term capital formation. But will he use that power? So the second point, India has bet on the wrong industries. India has enough labor force to command global manufacturing. But in reality, even Bangladesh has done way better. It starts with a comparative advantage, which is a fancy term those Western liberal economies are obsessed with. India has a young and huge labor force, and the median age is under 30 years old. This should be its golden moment for manufacturing. It's the perfect timing to have millions of young people to work at these labor-intensive sectors, textiles, toys, consumer electronics, all these manufacturing jobs. Think about how China grew back in the 90s. However, India didn't follow that playbook. Instead, it prioritized these capital-intensive sectors like steel, petrochemicals, and telecom infrastructures. These are industries with very high entry barriers, but low employment absorptions and massive state involvement. So who benefits from that? It's not Indian people. It's the huge conglomerates like Tata and Adani, these companies with very deep political ties. They've become the gatekeepers or the innovators for Indians. Compare that with China in the 90s. Beijing has reduced subsidies to heavy industries, and it sheltered these inefficient state-owned enterprises, redirected labor to light manufacturing like textiles, plastic goods, and low-end electronics. And what's the result? The Chinese exports boomed, the capital accumulated, and the skill sets learned. Only after that did China re-enter the heavy industry, but with tremendous capital and competence this time, and enough firepower to compete globally. Beat up the American industries, squeeze the European industries. But India skipped that step. Meanwhile, Bangladesh, which is India's close neighbor, with far fewer resources, focused relentlessly on textiles and surpassed India in per capita income by 2020. If India doesn't address its problems of land acquisition barriers, entrenched elites, and lack of infrastructures, it will miss its shot at becoming the world's next workshop. And the irony is that, as right now China is offloading its labor-intensive manufacturing to overseas, and Chinese companies are building plants elsewhere. But Indian policymakers have created conditions that miss this tremendous opportunity. Chinese firms now prefer Vietnam, Thailand, even as far as Ethiopia in Africa, because they are easy to operate than India. India has enough people, but without the right policies, the labor remains idle and capital goes elsewhere. So the third point is about India's tech illusion. that outsourcing is not innovation. India's IT and software industry was never a development model. It was an outsourcing trap. While China built factories and labs, India sent its own coders to Silicon Valley. And that is how you miss a tech revolution at home. India has been called a global hub for software services, but that success has created complacency. Outsourcing is not industrialization nor innovation. It's just a cheap labor pool. You are selling code to Silicon Valley. You are not building machines. You are not exporting complex electronics. Back in the 2000s, Indian leaders like Singh believed that India could leapfrog manufacturing entirely and go straight from agriculture to service economy. It never worked out because software itself doesn't scale employment. The IT industry in India has created prosperity for only a handful of people, mostly urban, English-speaking, and global-facing elites. But these people, they have done nothing for the rural India. And worse than that, they have created a path dependency that nowadays India's top engineering talents would just go to American companies, Google, Microsoft, Amazon, but not into the Indians' R&D, not into its industrial developments. The result is a knowledge dream for India, as if Silicon Valley and Wall Street have been sucking the broadland out of India's future talents. China understands this risk very early on. Since 2000, China has invested heavily in science and technology, building research labs in robotics, biotech, and defense sectors. China has this program called the Southern Talents, which brought the Chinese scientists back home. Today, China files more patents than the United States. If India doesn't channel its scientific capacity into domestic industrial development, it will remain a support service hub, a giant call center for the West, not a tech powerhouse. Now it's time to face what's really going on. India's population advantage would not last forever. Its fertility rates are falling, people are having less children, and the working age population will shrink. The next generation of young Indians wouldn't accept a future call center job and government handouts. In year 2025, China's per capita GDP is 5 times more than India. I mean, the future isn't just about numbers. It's about what kind of economy you want to build, who you are building it for, and who you want to make friends with, the West or the rest. So if you want more deep dive like this, where we challenge status quo and false narratives, hit like, drop your take in the comments, and follow for more. Let's elevate the conversation around the world.